Welcome to the Workbench and welcome to another episode of Wheels Wings TV. The F4U Corsair needs no introduction, one of the iconic aircraft of the Second World War that would soldier on well into the 1950s and 60s. And with the new movie Devotion, its use in the Korean War by the US Navy and Marines is coming back to the forefront. So today we have the 1/72nd scale F4U-4 Corsair from Revell, as well as the Starfighter Decals set to depict the aircraft flown by Lieutenant Tom Hudner and Ensign Jesse Brown in December of 1950. Let's have a look. For sprue, we have our lower wing half, right half of the fuselage, tail planes, some cockpit parts, and a few other bits and bobs. The fabric effect on the wings is done rather nicely with some subtle scalloping effect. Maybe a little overdone, but under some primer and paint that'll look just fine. Very fine panel lines in the fuselage that get very soft as we start approaching perpendicular to the mold, or I guess I should say parallel to the mold. The mold is coming this way, so as we go 90 degrees to the mold, detail along the bottom here is getting pretty soft. Some covers for the wheel bay, tail wheel, some big chunk of something, some of the little antennas, pitot tube, got our oil cooler intakes there, the vague interpretation of a Pratt & Whitney R2800, that is pretty sad. I've seen Revell kits that are way older than this with much better engines, so obviously the B team was in charge of this one. A little bit of structure in the tail wheel, not that you're ever really going to see that. A little bit of flash in the ejection ports. Need to open those up a little bit. We do have a separate insert for the guns. So I guess you don't have a seam running through your 50 cal machine guns. Yeah. Basic rendition of instrument faces on the instrument panel there, which is molded with the front wall of the cockpit. Wingtips are molded separately. I do know that Revell came out with a fleet air arm boxing the Corsair, so I'm assuming that's what that's catering to. Next sprue, we have our upper wing halves, the other half of the fuselage, rudder, wheel bay covers, cockpit detail, some landing gear bits, control column, a lot of flash on these parts here, but possibly even some not mold slip, just really bad mold lines. We've got our leading edge inserts for the 650 caliber machine guns. Flaps are molded, flaps and ailerons molded to the upper wing, so you get a nice defined line there for the control surfaces. Copyright 2014 by Revell. The rear bank of our vaguely represented Pratt & Whitney R2800. I do have some nice detail in the interfaces of the gear doors. Of course, fabric effect on flaps, rudder, and the upper wings as well. Left half of the fuselage, same story as the right half. Unfortunately, just that flash is really hard to miss. And that with the pilot's seat here, which the back and the bottom are like equally sized, which looks really weird. Somebody got their dimensions off on that one, I think. This part here is rather nice, having the upper cowling here with this big round oil tank cover separate, so you don't have a seam line running through that. As long as this part fits to the fuselage well, that won't be a big deal. Next sprue, we've got some 500-pound bombs with a whole bunch of flash on them. We've got our main wheels with more mold seams on them. The inner hub is separate, the outer hub isn't, for reasons. We've got our two drop tanks. Now, there is a natural rolled seam horizontally across those fuel tanks, so why Revell would decide to mold them left and right when they easily could have done it top and bottom and then had no seam to deal with is curious. So I'm going to have to remove a lot of flash on those bombs if you're using them. Going to have to sand down those main wheels. Not that there's any tread detail to worry about losing. But yeah, those, when Vought designed the drop tanks in top and bottom half, why would you reinvent the wheel and decide to do it left and right? I'm not sure what they were thinking on that. And finally, we have the F4U-4 specific sprue. So we've got the front of the cowling with the little smiley chin scoop. We've got, of course, the different shape for the forward fuselage, closed cooling fins, open cooling fins, and the last part of the fuselage before the cowling with the exhaust pipes. As well, we also have 4 20mm cannons. The F4U-4s came in 650s or 4 20mm options. Now, let us have a look at our lower wing and see if we can find the problem. 4 guns, 6 ejection ports. So the wing has been designed from the outset for the 650 cal machine guns with a kind of half attempt at the cannons. So, and of course the cannons are centered in that opening, so they're technically not going to line up. So I'm assuming the cheat here is to just fill in 2 of the 6 ejection ports so that you have 4 for your 20mm cannons. That seems a little bit lazy. Doing a dedicated lower wing might have been a better idea, guys. Or having a separate wing insert here in a conjunction with the different gun inserts. So that's a little bothersome. That and these cannons are pretty big mold seam down the center. So what I would probably do is just cut those barrels off, get those seam lines taken care of, install it, and then drill them out and put some fine brass tubing or something in there for the gun barrels. Prop looks good. Broad cord 4-bladed. No Ironically, no real mold seam on that, yet big ones on everything else. A little bit of flash on the cooling fins here. So, bit of a mixed bag, and of course the chin intake here is molded solid with kind of a grill effect in there. I'm not sure if that's true to the real thing or if it was just an open scoop, kind of like a Hellcat, but mixed bag. Last sprue is a clear sprue with our windshield and sliding portion of the canopy. The F4U-4 Corsairs did have a flat windshield in the front as opposed to the complete curve wraparound one of the F1 Corsairs. Now, the windshield looks good, but that sliding portion looks pretty thick, and oh, yeah, you're not going to see much through that thing. So if you like cockpits, you might want to leave this one open. Windshield is really nice, main part of the canopy because of that sort of bubble, and I'm assuming that's quite thick. Yeah, you're not going to necessarily see much in the cockpit. I'm pretty sure the cockpits on these late Corsairs were all black anyway, so no harm, no foul. And time for the instructions. It is a level 3 because whatever, and when the box art plane is not put together well, you kind of makes you question how your build's gonna go. As we can see in the picture that the fit of that upper fuselage part is not very good. The fit around the cannons is not very good. The sliding portion of the canopy sits really high up. That seems weird, but I could be mistaken. Yeah, that's interesting. Parts or stir your paint, let Decals soak, etc., etc. The usual annoying mixes for Revell paints because they don't have every single paint available in their paint line. That's obviously going to be some sort of US interior green, which exists in other paint lines. Sprue map. No parts called out not for use on this one. So you will be using pretty much everything. Step 1, wooden instrument panel and the front bulkhead, decal for the instruments, it's fine, gun sight, rudder pedals, decal seat belts, those never look good, but they are at least passable at 72 scale. And of course, Corsair didn't really have a floor, much like a lot of other planes, so everything is just mounted to one bulkhead or the other. Of course, side consoles go onto each fuselage half. The fuselage halves come together, and then you get that first front ring with the exhaust pipes. Upper and lower halves of the wings to go together. The intakes go into the front. Fuselage onto the wing. Hopefully that's a good fit. Rudder goes on, and then I guess I didn't even notice that part of the vertical fin was a separate piece. That's curious. Actually, I think, now that I think about it, I'm pretty sure the Corsair had a slightly offset vertical tail to counteract the torque of the that big engine, so that could be why. Horizontal tail planes go into place. And those are, of course, the exact same because the Corsair had one horizontal tail, and they just flipped it upside down for the opposite side. Why design two when you can get away with one? Which kind of seems to be Revell's ethos on this kit. We got our cowling with the with what they're considering an engine going together. And if you don't glue it, your propeller will spin. That goes on the front. Typically I would leave like the engine and the forward cowling off to facilitate painting a little bit easier. Top and bottom of the cowling come together, and then the very front ring with the intake goes on. Then we have that separate upper fuselage piece that we can tell probably is not going to fit well. Tail wheel with the arrestor hook. Tail wheel doors. At least these look like they have nice big attachment points. Wheels, landing gear legs, and other landing gear components. Hopefully those lock up good. Drop tanks, which you have to take care of the seam because reasons. Okay. So, okay, that's curious. So landing gear, or sorry, tail wheel doors and the main landing gear doors are molded in together to, say, depict an in-flight pose, kind of like what Airfix does. Great. Except there is absolutely no mention of an in-flight pose in the instructions. So why mold those together for as if you were doing in flight and not? So why they just wouldn't mold the doors separately anyway? I'm not quite sure on that one. I'm sure they have a reason. Drop tanks go on. The little doors covering landing gear legs go on. Canopy goes on. Some of the antennas. Optional opener closed. Prop goes on, pitot tube goes on, and I guess you're done. Only one paint scheme in this kit for a Corsair based at Naval Air Station Jacksonville, Florida in 1954. So it'll be post-Korea. Any color you want as long as it's gloss sea blue overall. But of course, we're not going to be doing this one. We have these nice aftermarket decals for the Corsairs flown by Lieutenant Thomas Hudner and Jesse Brown in December of 1950 in support of U.S. Marines in the Chosin Reservoir. Ensign Jesse Brown, of course, was the first African-American fighter pilot in the U.S. Navy, and would unfortunately be shot down and would die of his injuries just supporting those U.S. Marines on the ground. Of course, this is the whole plot of the new movie Devotion, which I highly encourage you to go see. Decals look kind of thick, but they feel very thin. Carrier film is kept to a relative minimum. White looks like it's going to be nice and opaque. Registration seems on point. I mean, you've got two colors, white and red. Now, you do get multiple numbers here because according to this, plane number for Brown could have been 217 or 203. And if you've seen the movie, or at least the posters for it, his aircraft is number 211. So exactly who is right, I don't know. But if you are building out of the kit, decals here. Doesn't say, but I'm assuming these are printed in Italy. So these are done by Cartograph or Revell, so these are going to be drama-free. The orange portion is, Ideally, I'd like to paint that, but I guess not everybody can do that, so hopefully that won't get washed out on the blue. Likewise, hopefully all the white is nice and opaque so you don't lose any of that over the dark blue. Why they would go to the extra effort to print the blue surrounds on the roundels when you got a dark blue airplane that they didn't paint the surround on anyway. I'm not quite sure what's going on there. But glossy, not stupidly thick, those should work just fine. So, the Revell F4U-4 Corsair. Not very inspiring. Engine is kind of kludgy. There's definitely some laziness going on in terms of like cannons versus machine guns. And I mean, when you can't get the one that goes on the box essentially to fit together, that's not very inspiring. So, but if you want to depict one of the aircraft from Devotion, either Hudner or Brown, this is probably still the best game in town. If you'd like to see more content like this, make sure to click like and subscribe. Thank you very much, and we'll catch you next time. Whoa, hold on one second. I ran out and I got the Tamiya F4U-1D Corsair as a little bit of a pseudo comparison. So here's our Revell drop tanks that are molded left and right for some reason versus Tamiya, who were like, hey, good enough for the real one, good enough for us. Molded in top and bottom. Thanks, Tamiya, for paying attention. Revell, nah, you make them work for it. Tamiya, well, hey, that looks easy. Ain't broke, don't fix it. Furthermore, Tamiya gives you 8 6-inch HVAR, high-velocity aerial rockets. Hudner and Brown were both armed with 8 HVARs on their fateful mission of December 1950. So if you get the Revell kit, you're going to need to source those rockets from somewhere. Probably Tamiya kit would be a good bet. Not only that, you're going to have to figure out where they go, because there's nothing on that wing to say, put rocket here. Tamiya, on the other hand, planned ahead with flashed over holes. Drill all those out, paint up your model, stick your rockets on, there you go, Bob's your uncle. And while we're at it here, look at the Tamiya engine compared to the Revell engine. Now, the Dash 4s did use an uprated R2800 radial engine, so I could see there maybe being some differences, but just in detail terms, the cooling fin detail is much sharper on the Tamiya kit. Even the push rods are more defined. The Revell kit looks like it was carved in mushy clay with a dull scalpel. So, not sure what to make of that. Instrument panel is comparable. You know, panel lines are, the Tamiya ones are maybe a bit sharper. Fabric texture is comparable on both. Tamiya does theirs slightly different, but they both look good. One thing, though, that ginormously, weirdly proportioned seat. We've got our Tamiya one here. We've got our Revell one here. Yeah, I think I know which one looks better. As well as the wheels. Not a hint of barely a mold line on the Tamiya ones. The Revell ones look like they were molded in 2 halves and somebody glued them together really bad. Not to mention all the flash. But, yeah. So, in further conclusion, If you get the Revell F4U-4, I might suggest picking up a Tamiya Corsair for some additional needed and much improved parts. What a shocker. Tamiya did it better.